Hello and welcome to Chapter 1 of our leadership book. So Chapter 1 is about leaders and who is a leader, but essentially is about leadership, right? Not more about the people, but about the process. And the first thing we want to do is define leadership. And I wrote my dissertation on leadership and different leadership styles and different organizational cultures. And in my first opening paragraph, what I noted was the number of leadership studies. I found out there are many, many, many definitions of leadership, like about 1,000 of them, literally. And what we found out is a lot of them, many of the good ones, kind of boil down to the same thing. So we see in the first part of this definition, the leadership is a process. So it's something you do in which an individual exerts influence over others. And that fits most leadership models, most leadership definitions. So an individual, the leader, exerts influence over others. We're getting them to do something they weren't going to do before. The leader determines what that thing is. Right? It doesn't say make them do it. It says they exert influence. Maybe they get them to want to do it. And so let's keep going. So they exert influence over others and inspire, motivate, or direct them and their activities to help achieve group or organizational goals. Sometimes leaders don't necessarily get followers to follow the organizational goals. Sometimes they might have them go on strike. That would be a group goal, not of the team here, not of the group, not an organizational goal. So in terms of leadership, there's lots of key elements we're going to look at through this course of this book in this class. We're going to look at things like leaders and followers. We're going to look at how those leaders exert influence over those followers, what organizational objectives are. We'll talk about what makes good objectives and what good goals. We'll talk about how that affects outside people, and certainly going to talk about organizational change. How does leaders fit into management is often a question I get. And certainly the four classical definitions of management are planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. So we think of planning is the managers select the objectives for the organizations, like strategy planning. Organizing, they dole out the resources, decide how we're going to do it, who's going to do what, who we put in charge of different things. That's the organizing process. Leading is exerting influence, including motivational things, performance reviews, that type of thing. And then controlling is a monitoring activity. That's where the management pays attention to what's going on. How are we doing? Are we doing okay? Do they need more help? Do we need the redistribution of resources and so forth? So in that, leading is part of managing, but I repeat, do not think you need to be a manager to be a leader. That is in fact not true. So are all leaders managers? And the answer is managers are given a formal title and authority, but a leader is someone who's exert influence. So they can be a manager or a non-manager. You don't have to be a manager. You can certainly be a non-manager. And you may have known people throughout your lives who could really make things happen, really get people to do stuff, and they had no particular title or no particular place in an organization. Right, we talk about the followers, the person being influenced by the leader, right? And then which takes us to more influence, right? So it's the process of communicating ideas. We get acceptance of those ideas. We motivate followers, right? So we're going to talk about different ways to do that. As a matter of fact, when I talk to the undergraduate students, sometimes they'll tell me, well, I want to be a leader, but I can't get people to listen to me. I can't get them to do what I want them to do. Well, that's because you're not influencing them somehow, probably because you don't have power. So we're going to talk about the terms of power is the ability to influence others and how to get power even when you don't have a title. Certainly we need to pay attention to that. And influence, and certainly coercion is one type of power, but we'll talk about many others. So what do effective leaders do? Right? They influence followers, right, to support the organization's goals. Right? We might provide directions how to do that. We're going to talk about setting objectives in here and what makes a good objective, right? And then this thing happens continually. It's not a one-time thing. Usually it happens continually, and they enjoy working with people to make all these things happen. Right, whoops. And then it takes us to, are leaders born or made? We get that question a lot. In the old days, in jolly old England from 300 years ago, there was the idea of aristocracy, and it was genetics and what family you were born in, proper breeding, proper being raised in a proper environment, all of that. So now we found out that, does that influence your leadership style? And the answer is it does somewhat, but also how you react to, or how you adjust your behaviors for things around you. So certainly some people are born with more natural ability than others as leaders. I think of the same thing with athletics. Some people are born as really good runners, some of us not so much. On the other hand, some of us can develop our running skills by practicing at it. And the answer is we all can become better runners, no matter how bad or how good we are, if we run more and build up our stamina. So the same thing happens with leadership. If no matter how naturally good we are, whether we're really good just because that's the way we are, or we really struggle with it, we can all get better. Remember, even people that train for the Olympics, right, are the fastest people in the country, yet they practice, right, because they know they can get better. And so all people have potential leadership skills, some of us more than others, but certainly we can all get better with work. And there's an acceptance of this in the fact that organizations like the military, like the corporate world, spend many, many millions of dollars training people to be better leaders, as opposed to letting them flail around and hoping for the best. So a guy named Henry Mintzberg, when he was working on his dissertation for his doctorate in management, this was 3 or 4 decades ago. This is quite a while back. He was looking at the leaders of major corporate America, CEOs, and what did they do in terms of their time during the day. So he got permission to follow a number of very high-level people around. He had his clipboard, he had a stopwatch, and he's following around. Do they, in fact, do planning, organizing, leading, and controlling? Actually, it wasn't even the question of do they. The assumption was they do. The real question was how much time do they spend on each of those different modes during their day, and he was literally going to keep their time. Well, what Henry found out was that, in fact, is not what they do all day long. There's all kind of things not on the list. So we look at this list, and he divided them into 3 major categories. There's interpersonal things CEOs have to do and leaders have to do. There's informational things and decisional. So for instance, the first interpersonal thing, they have to be the figurehead. So when someone retires and they get a gold watch, often it's the leader, the CEO, who has to do that. If there's been a death in the workforce, somebody has to make a statement, right? It's the leader. They're the figurehead. It's like the Queen of England does things that the Prime Minister doesn't have to do. So they're the figurehead for the organization. There's just certain things they have to do to lend it the proper importance. They're also the leader. It's their job to influence others, including those inside the organization. So we'll talk a lot more about that, but that's certainly a big one. They're the liaison. They're the go-between between different parts of the organization or the outside of the organization. Down in the informational block, they monitor activities. They're at the top. All the information rolls upward, so they're monitoring what's going on and asking, do I need to take any action required based on these inputs. They're the disseminator of information, so they pass down information, particularly important information from different stakeholders to the rest of the organization. And they're the spokesperson for the organization, so in critical times, they're the ones who have to speak for the organization because it's assumed that because they're at the top, what they say is as strongly backed up as possible when you hear the leader saying it. Right down in the decisional block, they're also an entrepreneur. They're the ones who decide what risks the organization should take, what new ventures should we get into. Should we buy one of our competitors, right? Those big time questions they have to decide. They're a disturbance handler. When something happens, when there's been a row, there's been major disagreement, there's been a crisis, right? It's the leader needs to step in and help figure out what's going on and settle things down and get everybody back on task. They're the resource allocator, so they're the final arbitrator of who gets to do what and how things are going to happen and so forth. And then they're the negotiator, so they negotiate with maybe with the workers in the organization. They would negotiate with competitors, with customers. They're the top person, so kind of like they're the figurehead. They represent the organization, so they might be actually doing the negotiation, but they certainly have to sign off on it. So they make the top level agreements for the organization because they are at the top. So in this book, we're going to look at leadership from a standpoint of individual leadership, group leadership, and leadership of organizations. In the individual, we'll see how they focused on one-to-one, and we call that a dyadic process where each follower has a personal relationship with the leader. At the group level, we focus on these group processes and how we do things in a group setting, and certainly meetings are part of that. And I don't know about you, but I've been to some god-awful meetings in my day. And we're going to talk about what makes a good meeting and how to do that. And sometimes I tell the students, if that's all you get out of this course, it'll be worth it to keep people from suffering through bad meetings and total waste of time, and just it's worse than zero because it irritates people, and it's a negative influence sometimes. So we'll talk about what makes a good meeting. At the organizational level, we'll talk about organizational processes and organizational change a little bit. We've talked about a lot more of that in the MBA 602 class. All right, we're going to talk about different leadership theories and how we can try to find ones that have some help us to understand what's going on, to predict what's going on, and how to control situations and come out and be successful. So in here, we're going to talk about basically 4 different categories of leadership theories. We're going to talk about the trait theories, how smart you are, how tall you are, any of those type of inborn traits inside of a person. We're going to talk about behavioral issues, things you do, how you act, how you behave. We're going to talk about contingency theories based on the idea that you have to have multiple leadership styles, and you have to pull out the right leadership style for the right situation. And integrate is where we roll them all together. And certainly trait theories, we look at a little more definition on those, right? The things that often leaders have, the high level of energy, the how they look, this desire for dominance. They like to be the shot caller, the person making decisions, right? They have a certain amount of self-reliance or high self-reliance and self-image. They understand that they're the right person who can motivate this group of people to do this thing that hasn't been done before. And there's going to be problems along the way, but we can figure it out. So that takes a lot of self-reliance to be able to have that confidence, to be able to say you're the right person for that. Behavioral theories, we're going to talk about different styles used by effective leaders and how those work. And contingency, we're going to talk about, explain the appropriate style based on, it's more clear, the leader, the follower, and the situation. We'll state that over and over and over again in this course. When in future you're being interviewed for a job and they ask you, what's your leadership style? Your best answer is, your accurate answer should be, it depends. And it depends on what? Well, it depends on the leader, it depends on the follower, and it depends on the situation. So for instance, I used to be a Cub Scout leader, and I have 8-year-old little boys running around. That was one style of leadership, very directive, tell them what to do. In Boy Scouts, now they're 14, 15-year-old, there's a lot more two-way conversations. What do you want to do? There's a lot less specific instructions. They're expected to know how to do things and make better choices. And certainly, even in situational, I might have the same followers and the same leader, and if it's a complex question where we have lots of time, we would sit down, discuss it, take inputs, hear people out, hear what they think about it. Or it's a situation where something has happened and we need to immediately respond to it. We don't have time for multiple inputs. We don't have time for a sit and meet and greet and discuss things and chew it over and figure out the best approach. We have to, the right response is to act right now. So in that case, the leader would become much more autocratic and start giving orders, and the followers would understand that time is everything here. So we need to respond right away. Even if we think we might have other suggestions, we don't have time to debate that. We have to go right now. So situation certainly has a big influence on how leaders behave. Right, so, and we're going to try to predict, traits and behaviors that result in leadership success. And part of this course is you're going to have to write a paper on your own leadership traits and behaviors, and the key part of that is how you can improve those. And then we're going to integrate all these behaviors together, and that's part of your paper you'll be working on in here. Interesting discussion question is, what's more important for managers, the hard skills, the quantitative analysis, or the soft skills in dealing with people and relationships and leadership and so forth? And often it's the quantitative skills that help you get a job earlier in your career, but when you start moving up into management, it's the soft skills that help. And I know I've talked to a number of quantitative managers in my career, engineering managers, computer engineers, software people, accountants, finance, that type of thing, and they'll tell you that, boy, I shouldn't have got a degree in finance. I should have got a degree in psychology, right? Because that's the hard part of my job. And there's a lot of consensus that say that the soft skills take a long time to develop. It's the quantitative skills. It's kind of easy to learn. How to figure out net present value how to calculate net present value on a figure. It's much tougher to figure out what's going on with people. People are different. People are weird. What works on one doesn't work on another. Ask any parent of multiple children, and they'll tell you, I thought I was a good parent after the first one. I thought I knew what to do, and then the second one comes, and everything that worked for the first one doesn't work for the second one. Often, so these issues are real. We have a number of courses in the MBA curriculum that deal with these type of soft skill issues. and it's important to dig into those. The quantitative skills are absolutely vital in helping you figure out what's going on also, but certainly the soft skills are important, particularly the higher up you get in management. And as we look at leadership through the years, we see there's been this shift from the older, we'll refer to the old style of leadership as autocratic, barking orders. When I jump, you say how high, and so forth, as opposed to, and here we have the autocratic, all managers made all the decisions and people were just told what to do and expect to follow them. That has been around for a long, long time, and certainly in the last number of decades, there's less and less of that going on. We refer to as new leadership, more participative leaders ask opinions, they're willing to listen, hand off some of the decisions to others, and it focuses on more on leadership than giving orders. And it's you're going to share power with the employees, which some people are definitely uncomfortable with. But this develops into a good relationship with followers, and it actually is a more effective style of leadership in most situations.